Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Rob Edwards. Today I'm going to be doing what I promised to do during my Shazam review, which is have a look back at the recent DC superhero movies and to talk about my takes on them. I did briefly consider doing this as a ranking, doing my sort of top 10 most favourite to least favourite or whatever, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to get into that. I just want to give you my bullet points on each of these movies and what I liked, what I didn't like, and maybe I'll give them a grade. I should probably give them a grade. I'm starting with my list, hilariously, with Green Lantern, and I'm going to go through all the way to Shazam. So there's two sort of weird cases in this timeline of movies. There's Red 2, which is technically a DC movie, but it's not going to count for my rankings today. And there's also The Dark Knight Rises, which feels a bit weird to include in this list, but IMDb assures me it came out after Green Lantern, so I kinda have to include it in the list. First up then is Green Lantern, starring Ryan Reynolds, directed by Martin Campbell, from 2011. It's an interesting film, this one. Critical response to the Green Lantern movie and audience response to the Green Lantern movie was pretty poor as a whole. But I went in with something of a bias because I am a big fan of Green Lantern, the character from the comic books. One of the earliest characters I ever read in comics, and has some truly iconic storylines associated with him. Even in the more recent times, Jeff Johns' run is iconic, really. The Sinestro Corps War, Blackest Night, some fantastic material amongst those stories. So what did I think of this movie? Well, I defend it more than most, but there are problems with it. I think Ryan Reynolds is great in the movie, but I'm not convinced he's playing Hal Jordan. I think turning Parallax into some sort of soul-devouring smoke monster was a very weird direction to go, and I thought that the kind of washed out, poor CGI realization of Oa and the uniforms was all just kind of murky, muddy, horrible mess. But I do like quite a lot of what's in there. I loved the idea of having Hector Hammond being one of the villains. Just crazy that Hector Hammond would have a movie incarnation. He's such a weird villain in the comic books. To have him appear in the movies was fantastic. I loved that. Never expected it. Brilliant. Bring on Sonar and what was this evil star with his little starlet people. Oh, that's what we want to see in the next one. Look, it's not good. It really isn't. I think it's better than general perception has it. I think there's some good stuff in there, but for me, the thing that really put the nail in the coffin was when Hal and Carol are in this duel with the robot fighters, and Hal has his flashback. And at that moment, I lost all faith in this movie, because at that moment, we weren't in Green Lantern anymore, we were in Hot Shots. And that was not a vibe I wanted from my superhero movie. So it is probably one of my lower scores. I say I've got bias all the way here, but I'm only giving this a 6 out of 10. There's stuff in here that I really enjoyed, but overall, what a mess. Next up is 2012's Dark Knight Rises with Christian Bale as Batman and directed by Christopher Nolan. I am actually not a huge fan of the Nolan trilogy of Bat films. They're not bad. They are solid. They are good. They are well made, well crafted, well told. They're just not showing the Batman I want to see in movies. Is it the best Batman movie? Realization? Maybe. Is it the Batman movie realization that I want? No. So I'm not a great fan of this trilogy, and this third one is probably the weakest of the lot. There are an awful lot of logical inconsistencies in this movie. Why did so much of the Gotham police force go into the sewers and get trapped there for months? And how did they survive down there? How did they not get out? I don't understand. It makes no sense. I should say spoilers, I guess. I mean, this movie is like 7 years old, so if you haven't seen it by now. As we get further on during these, I will try not to make huge spoilers, but spoiler light throughout, basically. So yeah, Dark Knight Rises. It's better than Green Lantern, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to give it more than an 8 out of 10. Next up, we are entering the proper DC universe of films because we're talking Man of Steel with Henry Cavill stepping into Superman's tights and directed by Zack Snyder. And let me be clear about this. While I think Green Lantern is a poor movie, I can have fun with it. Man of Steel is arguably a better put together movie, but I don't like it. I do not like this movie. And in the interest of avoiding spoilers, it's not the thing which happens at the end which is so controversial, because that's happened in the comics and between those two characters. Am I vague enough for you? But in the comic books, they use that as an opportunity to analyse the character, to analyse Superman's choices, and to reflect that in a renewal of his philosophy going forwards. We don't get that in this movie. All we get is the spectacle, all we get is the drama, but we don't get any of the character. What character work we do get through this movie is so mishandled. The Kents are unrecognisable. They are supposed to be the people who provided Clark with his moral centre, why he becomes Superman. And instead we get Pa Kent saying, no, let the kids in the bus die. We see Martha Kent going, you don't know anyone, the human race, anything. Or is that with BVS? Anyway, just wrong, just not the Kents. So there isn't a way for Superman to get that moral centre. And that's why we don't see that. We don't see anything in this movie which would earn the character the title of Superman. We get the title of Superman right at the very end, and people are calling him Superman. But why? He does nothing in the movie to earn that title. Oh, I don't like this movie. I really don't like this movie. And I am going to rate it lower than Green Lantern because I cannot finish a rewatch of Man of Steel where I can finish a rewatch of Green Lantern. So I am giving this one a 5 out of 10. Next up, we have BVS. And while I'm very conscious that this video is already going to be long, and I want to be shorter about what I say about these movies, BVS is a bit of a problem because there are two versions. There's the theatrical cut and there is the Ultimate Edition. And the Ultimate Edition actually does fix quite a few problems that the theatrical version has. For example, in the Ultimate Edition, we actually get some Superman in our BVS movie, because really you barely get him at all in the theatrical version. It is the Batman movie, and actually Ben Affleck is pretty good as Batman. In fact, having said earlier that was this the best theatrical Batman? No, actually I think Ben Affleck's Batfleck in BVS, not so convinced in Justice League, but in BVS I think that Batman is pretty good. Not a fan of him killing people, but apart from that, pretty solid. The Ultimate Edition, as I say, does fix a lot of the problems. Not by any means all of the problems, but it does fix a lot of the problems in BVS, but it does go out of its way to introduce a few extra ones, and one of the things which I particularly hate is what it does with Jimmy Olsen. If you haven't seen the Ultimate Edition, basically one of the characters who gets killed early on in the theatrical version is revealed to be Jimmy Olsen. Not Jimmy Olsen, the Daily Porter cub photographer, but Jimmy Olsen, CIA agent, essentially. And that's just weird. Why? Okay, Zack Snyder, you have no use for this character. Fair enough. Not arguing that point at all. But to kill him off so that other people can't use it, it's just weird. Oh, also, the way it introduces the other Justice League characters, don't like that at all. Except, of course, the introduction of Wonder Woman, who is fantastic. So actually scoring BVS is pretty tricky. I think the theatrical version might be a 6 out of 10. It's a very different movie from Green Lantern, but I get the same kind of level of enjoyment out of it. Flawed, but there are things in it I like. The Ultimate Edition might scrape its way to a 6.5. I don't know that I can give it a 7. Let's give it 6.5. So it takes a step forward. It takes a step forward. That's a positive thing, but it's still not great. Oh, DC, why must you do this to us? Okay, we have to go quicker. Suicide Squad. Brilliant trailer, not as brilliant movie. I actually got to the end of Suicide Squad and turned to my wife and said, actually, I quite enjoyed that. And she said she did too. There are things in there I like. The portrayal of Harley, Will Smith being Will Smith as Deadshot was a lot of fun. I liked some of the gags, some of the humour in there. The appearance of Batman and the Flash in there were both very small cameos, but very well done. I didn't like the Skybeam. I didn't like the Enchantress dancing villain. But I still liked it more than BVS. 7 out of 10 for Suicide Squad. Oh, what I would say, I'm not a great technician of movies, and I am not, a brilliant editor myself, as anyone who's watched any of my YouTube videos knows. But Suicide Squad is probably the only movie where I've sat and actively noticed how bad the editing in it is. Which is, something, I guess. 7 out of 10. So earlier on in this video, I said that the Nolan trilogy was arguably the best portrayal of Batman in the movies. And then I got to Ben Affleck and contradicted myself and said I preferred him. And then I got to Lego Batman, and I kind of have to contradict myself again in that I love the portrayal of Batman in Lego Batman. Is it Batman as I know him from the comic books? It totally is not. Although it sort of is. That's very confusing. But I love Lego Batman. It is not as strong as the Lego movie, the original, but it is very, very good, and it's very, very funny. And there's lots of very clever Batman jokes in there. And I cannot give it lower than 8 out of 10. I'm tempted to give it a 9. No, sticking with 8. 8 out of 10 for Lego Batman. So much fun. If you haven't seen it, if you like animation, do yourself a favour, go and watch it. 8 out of 10 for Lego Batman. Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman was one of the best things in BVS, so I was very much looking forward to her solo film, and it did not disappoint. It does fall apart a little bit in the third act, and I wish they'd gone a slightly different way with it. But it's really just a quibble at this point. The No Man's Land scene, amazing. The fish out of water stuff with Diana in London, fantastic. The portrayal of the backstory, Wonder Woman finding her powers when she's on Themyscira still, loved all of that. I don't know that I have anything more to say about this movie. I also really like Wonder Woman's theme. It doesn't necessarily fit the rest of the style of the movie, but when it kicks in on the assault on the village, just brilliant. I love it, love it. 9 out of 10 for Wonder Woman. It could have gotten a 10 if it had stuck with Act 3, but I can't give it less than 9. Fantastic. Justice League is better than it has any right to be. Given the production mayhem behind the scenes, Zack Snyder having to step away as director, Joss Whedon having to come on and take it on, the whole moustache gate problem with... I just said moustache in a very strange way. We'll leave it in. That whole problem with Henry Cavill, this was a hot mess. This had every right to be a complete dumpster fire. And it's not. Is it a great movie? No. No, it isn't. Sadly, I wish it was. I wish it was, because I want to see a great Justice League movie, because I am more of a fan of Justice League than I am of the Avengers from the comic books, by a huge margin. I'm more of a DC man, as I've said. So I desperately wanted a good Justice League movie, and this is not a good Justice League movie. But it is better than I had any right to expect. I think that we finally get Henry Cavill playing Superman. It's not until the very end of the movie, but we've seen Henry Cavill now in Man of Steel, BVS and Justice League, and we finally see him playing a character I recognise as Superman at the end of Justice League. And if we never see Henry Cavill in the suit again, that would be a shame, because Henry Cavill, when he is allowed to play Superman, is a really good Superman. And I enjoyed Ray Fisher's Cyborg. I thought Ezra Miller's Flash was not my Flash, but quite an interesting take on him. I quite enjoyed the funnier take on him. Wonder Woman was great again. Ben Affleck peaked in BVS, I'm afraid. He's not as good in this movie. But he's still fine. He's still fine in here. Steppenwolf is an ugly, poorly realised CGI monstrosity, and the plot line that they salvaged out of the Zack Snyder version of Justice League barely holds together. But I like Justice League. I enjoyed Justice League. I am going to give it a solid 7 out of 10. Jason Momoa's Aquaman next, and I really enjoyed it. I have a couple of issues with it, mostly relating to kind of the overwhelming CGI fest of the battle at the end, but until that point, it's just a rip-roaring adventure yarn with a likeable main lead. Not a great deal of acting going on anywhere in the movie, really, but I really enjoyed Jason Momoa's Aquaman, and I quite enjoyed a couple of the really nice touches. When he eats the rose to copy Mera, that just kind of adorable, really. The cinematography when they dive off the fishing boat down into the trench, amazing. The whole sequence is fantastic, and if it's not the most original and creative story ever, I thought visually amazing, if a little overwhelming towards the end, and just a good time in the movie theatre. Just a good time in the movie theatre. Did I enjoy it as much as Wonder Woman? Yeah, actually, do you know what? I was going to say no, but yeah, I did. I'm going to give Aquaman a 9 out of 10 as well. Brilliant. Good on you, Mr. Momoa. And James Wan, the director. And that brings us bang up to date with Shazam. I'm not going to give you a potted review of Shazam now. If you want to go and see my review of Shazam, go and watch my review of Shazam. But I didn't give it a rating in that time, so let me give that a rating now, just to finish off my ratings of my 10 DC movies. I'm only giving this one an 8 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed Shazam. As I said in the review, I loved it. I thought it was great, but I wasn't blown away by it, so I can't give it the 9 out of 10 for being bonkers or being amazing. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It is a very good, very solid movie. And I hear that there is a Shazam 2 coming, and I am delighted by that news. That brings us to the end of my review of the DC Universe movies. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly had fun looking back at those movies and coming up with my grade on them. I think I'm happy with the result. The next video on this channel is likely to be my review of the premiere episode of the finale season of Game of Thrones. Expect that probably Wednesday next week. But in the meantime, if you haven't seen my review of Shazam, be sure to check it out. Click the box here. And if you want to find out more as me as a writer, check the box over here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Cheers.